Great. Good to be with all of you. Today we're going to focus on the Zohar, and I'm happy to do this in honor of Fran's mother. Fran, I'm so glad you can be with us and honor her in this way as in all the other ways you have. Uh, we began last week looking at how the Kabbalah expands the meaning of Torah, and we're focusing today on the Zohar. So let me say a word or two about the Zohar, one of the most amazing creations in the Jewish library. The Zohar, you could say most simply, is a commentary on the Torah, a mystical commentary on the Torah, a little bit like Rashi, going verse by verse. The Zohar doesn't cover every verse, but every major story. It's really often printed in 3 volumes in the original Aramaic, 1 volume on Genesis, 1 volume on Exodus, and 1 volume on the rest. This seems to happen with a lot of commentaries. The authors get very excited about Genesis and Exodus, and they kind of lose steam when you get to some of the details about the sacrifices and the rituals in Leviticus. So the Zohar follows that model. When was the Zohar written? This is actually a controversial question because the tradition is that the Zohar goes back to the 2nd century, that it was written in the circle of a famous rabbi, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yochai, who was a student of Rabbi Akiva. He's featured prominently in the Mishnah and the Talmud. But the person who first made the Zohar available, the Zohar was never known in the Jewish world until the 13th century. So this is more than a millennium after the supposed author. Rabbi Shimon, to whom the Zohar is attributed, 2nd century. Moses de Leon, a Kabbalist who lived in Spain, made the Zohar available toward the end of the 13th century, and he claimed that he was simply copying from an ancient manuscript, that he had somehow come into possession of this treasure house composed in the circle of the ancient Rabbi Shimon, and he was making it available to the world. Some people were suspicious, and they wondered if Moses de Leon was writing it himself and attributing it to the ancient Rabbi Shimon. Why would he attribute it to someone else? Usually an author is very proud of what they've written, but Moses de Leon perhaps attributed it to Rabbi Shimon because of the radical ideas in the Zohar, some of which we'll see today, imagining the Torah in such new, striking ways. I mentioned last week the notion of Shekhinah, the feminine aspect of God, saying that God is equally male and female. That's certainly a very radical move in Western religion, where God is so predominantly masculine. So God is all of a sudden half male and half female, ultimately beyond all gender, ultimately infinite or infinity, that term Ein Sof. So one radical notion is that God is female as well as male. The second, that God is actually better called infinite. None of the biblical names of God are really adequate, according to the Zohar. And the third radical notion, we also mentioned the need that God has for us. God is in need of the human being. You could say that God is potentially in the world, but we have to actualize that divine potential. So we could say a lot more about the Zohar, but let's dive in right away to the first passage, and we'll see what the Zohar is up to. These texts are going to be sent out afterward. You'll have them. For now, I'll keep them up on the screen for much of the time. And I'm going to pause after each passage so that you can ask questions. So this is a teaching from the Zohar. I titled it How to Look at Torah. And here we have the hero, Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so this is, the person to whom the Zohar is attributed. This is Shimon bar Yochai, Shimon the son of Yochai, who lived in the 2nd century. But as we say, the Zohar was probably actually written in the 13th century, so the author is attributing it to Rabbi Shimon. He is, you could say, putting words into Rabbi Shimon's mouth. Rabbi Shimon said, "Woe to the human being who says the Torah presents mere stories and ordinary words. If so, We could compose a Torah right now with ordinary words, and better than all of them. To present matters of the world, even rulers of the world possess words more sublime. If so, let us follow them and make a Torah out of them. Ah, but all the words of Torah are sublime words, sublime secrets. You see there's some notes here off to the left. This is from a simpler edition of the Zohar, a little book I put together called Zohar, Annotated and Explained. Kind of strange title, but it's in a series like that. Quran, Annotated and Explained, various holy texts. This is Zohar, Annotated and Explained. The full edition I did, the Pritzker edition, has a lot more material there, but I didn't want to overburden people with the long notes that are in that edition. So for today, we're looking at a simpler edition, the translation on the right and some very brief notes on the left. So let's look at this first one, Sublime Secrets. A basic principle of the Zohar is that every word in the Torah contains numerous secret meanings on various levels. Okay, let's look at what he's saying here in this first paragraph. Woe to the human being who says the Torah is just a book of stories. Now, there were people in Spain at the time, okay, we're talking about the 13th century. There were some Jews who were criticizing the Torah and saying, oh, this is just stories. Is it really factually true? That sounds like a very modern attitude, but there were skeptics in the Middle Ages too. And Moses de Leon, the author of the Zohar, here under the guise of Rabbi Shimon, is saying, woe to those people. Because if that were the case, if the Torah was just a book of stories, and here's something rather remarkable, if so, we could compose a Torah right now with ordinary words, and better than all of them. Now, what does them refer to? Them can only refer to either stories or words. But in either case, it's a very radical statement. It's a shocking statement. We could write a better Torah. In other words, the stories in the Torah, they're pretty good, but they're not the greatest stories. Maybe his audience is aware of, some of the tales of chivalry, right? With knights fighting dragons, or knights rescuing a damsel in distress. So you can find great stories in the Middle Ages, and the Torah stories are okay, but are they really as exciting as certain contemporary stories? So Moses de Leon or Rabbi Shimon are saying, if the Torah is just a book of stories, if it's just normal words, we could write a better Torah. Now, of course, he's going to say that's not the case because everything in the Torah is a secret. But even so, to say that in a hypothetical sense, we could compose a Torah better than the Torah, it's pretty shocking. Now, what does this mean? Even rulers of the world possess words more sublime. He has in mind kings, European kings, who would collect fables. They would collect words of wisdom, maybe teachings that would guide them. And those are also beautiful compositions. Maybe we should turn those into a Torah. But he dismisses that possibility because all the words of Torah are sublime words, sublime secrets. Okay, let's continue. Come and see. Okay, the Zohar loves to say this, come and see. In the Aramaic, say the Zohar is written in Aramaic, not in Hebrew. Why in Aramaic? Partly to make it look ancient, right? Moses de Leon is in Spain in the 13th century. He's trying to present a book as ancient wisdom. He doesn't want to say this is something I thought up. He's attributing it to the ancient Rabbi Shimon. So he writes in Aramaic to make it look like the Talmud. So the Aramaic here is ta chazeh, come and see. In Hebrew, you would say bo ure'eh. Now it's interesting, the Talmud never says ta chazeh. The Talmud says ta shma, come and hear, come and listen. Okay, that's a more rational approach, listening and reasoning. For the Zohar, it's more visionary, more imaginative. Come and see. Imagine this. What does he want us to imagine? The world above and the world below are perfectly balanced. Israel below, the angels above. Okay, it's kind of saying, Israel are almost like angels. There's something angelic about Israel. Now we know, there are many wonderful Jews, but there's some Jews who are not, totally angelic. But for the author of the Zohar, there's an upper world, a lower world. One balances the other. Israel is here, the angels are above. Of the angels is written, he makes his angels spirits. Beautiful line from Psalms. Look over at the note. On the left, he makes his angels spirits. The verse is usually understood to mean he makes winds his messengers. This is in Psalm 104, Oseh malachav ruchot. God makes the ruchot, God makes the winds his messengers. If God wants something done, he sends a wind to do it, right? Like to split the Red Sea. But Rabbi Shimon reads it differently. Not he makes winds his messengers, he makes his messengers, in other words, the angels, spirits. In other words, the angels are spiritual. People are physical, but the angels are spiritual. But look what happens. But when they descend, they put on the garment of this world. Okay, if an angel appears in the world, it takes on physical form. You could think of the story of Abraham, who's visited by three messengers. He doesn't know that they're angels because they appear as human beings. So that's typical of how an angel manifests. An angel takes on physical form, and Rabbi Shimon explains, if they did not put on a garment befitting this world, they could not endure in this world, and the world could not endure them. Yeah, an angel can't manifest in pure spiritual form because the angel couldn't handle the gross material nature of the world, and the world couldn't handle that influx of pure, potent, angelic energy. So the angel appears in a human form, and the Zohar is calling that putting on a garment. The Zohar, okay, the angel is putting on a garment, a physical garment. You could think of, the invisible man putting on a jacket and therefore becoming visible. So the angel puts on a physical garment, takes on physical form. If this is so with the angels, how much more so with Torah, who created them and all the worlds, and for whose sake they all exist. In descending to this world, if she, meaning Torah, did not put on garments of this world, the world could not endure. Okay, what's going on there? He began talking about angels, but that was just to start his argument. He wants to move to Torah, right? This is about Torah. If the angels have to take on physical form, the Torah is even more potent, even more spiritual. What does he mean the Torah created them? The Torah created all the worlds. I thought God created the world. But look over the note number 4 on the left. Torah who created them. According to the Mishnah, the Torah itself was the precious instrument by which the world was created. Okay, according to another teaching, God looked into the Torah and created the world. Okay, we mentioned this last week. God gazed into the Torah and created the world. So the Torah helped God create the world. And the Mishnah actually says the instrument by which the world was created. That's how Rav Shimon can say the Torah created the angels, created all the worlds, and the whole world exists, and the angels exist for the sake of Torah. Right here we are on a Sunday afternoon studying Torah. Why are we studying Torah? Something in us feels a yearning to learn, a desire to study Torah. So you could say the world exists for the sake of Torah. So if Torah is that potent, is that spiritual, when Torah appears in the world, she has to put on garments of this world. Otherwise, the world could not endure. The world could not stand the total, unadulterated power of Torah. So Torah puts on a garment. And what is that garment? So he continues, so the story of Torah is the garment of Torah. Okay, the story is just the garment. It's not the essence of Torah. There's something deeper. That's the Zohar's point. There's something deeper than what you read on the surface. Whoever thinks that the garment is the real Torah and not something else, may his spirit deflate. Okay, this is a beautiful rabbinic curse. In Aramaic, tipach ruche, may his ruach blow out of him. In other words, may his spirit escape, and he will deflate. May his spirit blow out, and the person will collapse into a bag of bones. In other words, the worst thing is to say that there's nothing deeper in the Torah than just the narrative. That's just the garment. If you think that, if you think the garment is the real Torah, you will have no share in the world that is coming. That is why David said, why does he say that? David said, because he's going to quote a verse from Psalms. Okay, and David is traditionally the author of Psalms. That is why David said, open my eyes so I can see wonders out of your Torah. Beautiful verse in the Psalm 119. The Hebrew, Gal Einai ve'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Open my eyes, roll open my eyes, uncover my eyes, so I can see wonders out of your Torah, what is under the garment of Torah. Okay, so the Zohar is calling us to gaze beneath the garment. And another, come and see. It's almost a paragraph marker in the Zohar, come and see. Come and see. There is a garment visible to all. When those fools see someone in a good-looking garment, they look no further. But the essence of the garment is the body. The essence of the body is the soul. Okay, you're walking down the street, you see somebody dressed in a beautiful suit, a beautiful dress, and you're very impressed. But that's just a foolish view. A fool thinks that the garment is what matters. But of course, the essence of the garment is the person's body, and the essence of the body is something deeper, the soul. So again, don't be fooled by surfaces. So it is with Torah. She has a body, the commandments of Torah, called embodiment of Torah. This body is clothed in garments, stories of this world. Fools of the world look only at that garment, the story of Torah. They know nothing more. They do not look at what is under that garment. Those who know more do not look at the garment, but rather at the body under that garment. Wise ones, servants of the King on high, those who stood at Mount Sinai, look only at the soul, root of all, real Torah. In the time to come, they are destined to look at the soul of Torah. Okay, this is so typical of the Zohar. You feel like you're actually getting a handle on what he's saying, and then he moves it up a level. Okay, we had garment and body and soul. All of a sudden, we have the soul of the soul. There's a soul of the soul. Even the soul isn't the deepest. Okay, let's look through this paragraph closely. This is really the center of the piece. So the Torah has a body. Okay, we know the garment is the story. There's something beneath the garment, which is the body, and that's the mitzvot. The mitzvot are the body. In fact, they're called in Hebrew gufei Torah, bodies of Torah. Okay, look at note 5. The essential teachings are called gufei Torah, and here he's expanding that, the commandments of the Torah. Let's take an example, right? There's a story in the Torah, someone actually mentioned it last week, Jacob wrestling with the angel. Okay, it's a beautiful narrative in Genesis. There's a mitzvah that's hidden beneath that garment. The narrative layer is the garment. There's a body beneath that garment, and the body is the mitzvah, not to eat that particular cut of meat if you slaughter an animal, right? Don't eat the meat that's by the sciatic nerve. So it's one of the first laws of kashrut, and there it's taught through a narrative. The story is the garment, the mitzvah is the body. That's why he says this body is clothed in garments, stories of the world. Fools look only at the garment. They don't look at what's under the garment. If you know more, you look at the body under the garment. Okay, you penetrate the narrative layer and appreciate the mitzvah. Okay, you're not fooled by the surface meaning. But now he goes even deeper. Wise ones, servants of the King on high, those who stood at Mount Sinai, they look at the soul of Torah. Now, we don't know what the soul is. We know the garment is the story. The body is the mitzvah that's conveyed by that story. What's the soul? He hasn't said that. We'll come to that eventually. But for now, what does he mean, wise ones, those who stood at Mount Sinai? Let's take a look at this note over on the left, note 8. According to the Midrash, the souls of all those who were not yet born were present at Mount Sinai. when God revealed the Torah. Okay, every Jew, the soul of every Jew was present at Mount Sinai. Now, here the Zohar seems to suggest only the wise ones were present, only the mystics were present. Or maybe that means to be a mystic is to remember the original revelation. Mystical wisdom is going back to some primordial truth that was there even before the Torah was written. Okay, the original wisdom of God's mind. You might say what we called last week primordial Torah. There's the written Torah, the oral Torah, but there's an ancient layer of Torah. And maybe what he's saying here is if you get in touch with ancient wisdom, it's as if you are standing at Mount Sinai. So from that perspective, you actually can see the soul, the root of all real Torah. He doesn't say what that is yet. But even that's not the ultimate. In the time to come, people will see the soul of Torah. Okay, let me pause there. We'll take one or two questions before we continue with the passage. If you can raise your hand if you'd like. I see Christopher has a question already, so please.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Just as it behooves us to look beyond the story in the Torah to, look beneath the garment in order to understand its true meaning. I've always suspected that in the text of the Zohar that perhaps they want us to conclude that we need to do the very same thing for the Zohar also. We have to take those stories in Midrashim and the Zohar and also look deeper beneath those garments.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the Zohar, there's a lot of fascinating teaching, but it is a product of its time. And I think it's good to be somewhat skeptical, and to, as you say, to look beneath the garment, even for the Zohar itself, for anything, for newspapers, for discussions, for conversations, to see what's being conveyed, what's between the lines, and that's a good approach for the Zohar too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please. You'll just great.
Yeah,
Please.
hi. So I apologize if this is an ignorant question, naive question, but how widespread was knowledge of Aramaic in the 13th century, and how might that be different from a more ancient Aramaic?
Yeah, it's a good question. Moses de Leon, okay, the main composer of the Zohar, he's writing it in Aramaic to make it look ancient, but in a sense, he certainly limited the audience who could read it. Scholars, basically anybody who studied Talmud knew Aramaic, but common Jews did not have enough Aramaic really to make sense of the Talmud. If you were learned, if you went to yeshiva, there were yeshivot then, but not everybody made it to yeshiva. I have no idea exactly, but I'd estimate maybe 5% of the Jewish population could handle Aramaic. Maybe 10% could make some sense of the Aramaic. So certainly the Zohar begins in very limited circles. It really spreads very gradually. If you compare that to the time of the Talmud, then Aramaic was the lingua franca. Aramaic was really spoken widely. For example, we know Jesus knew Aramaic because Aramaic was probably much better than his Hebrew. Hebrew wasn't widely spoken in the first few centuries, but Aramaic was. So in Rabbi Shimon's day, everyone would understand it. In Moshe de Leon's day, very few people would understand it. Gradually, the Zohar spreads, and it was translated into Hebrew. Bits of it were translated into Hebrew very soon after it was written. And then some was translated into Latin because Christians were attracted to it. It was translated into Latin in the Renaissance, in Italy, good parts of it. But that's good you raised that because we're talking about a small circle of Kabbalists from the 13th century. Gradually, the knowledge of Zohar spreads. What really spread it was in Sfat, in Safed, where people wrote books in Hebrew, spreading the ideas of the Zohar, kind of what's called Kabbalistic ethical literature. And then it spread much more widely. And then Hasidism would take little bits of Zohar and apply them to daily life. And then finally it was translated into Western languages. Great. Bina, please.
Shalom, Professor Matt. So I have a question and also a quick comment. My question is, you had mentioned, or you read to us that Zohar says that God used Torah to create the world. So the question is, does Zohar believe that God wrote the Torah first and then looked at her own work of Torah to create the world? And as an aside, I couldn't resist to say, when you read gaze beneath the garment, I couldn't help it. The Wizard of Oz just shot to me, you know, behind the man behind the curtain or looking behind the curtain, and made me wonder, did the creators of that, you know, study Zohar or make any connection?
Yeah, interesting. Not to be satisfied with the surface. That applies to so much in literature. Yeah, now this really goes back, to the rabbinic view, right? The rabbis say God gazed into the Torah and created the world. So what do they mean? This came up last week too. In a sense, I mean, you do find the notion that Torah preceded creation. Torah was there before the world. But I think one way to understand that is that they're talking about Torah as the divine mind, right? Because we talked about the written Torah, the oral Torah, and the primordial Torah, this Torah Kedumah. And I think that's best understood as the same as wisdom, right? Last week we looked at those passages, the ripening of Torah. The Torah is just a fraction of God's wisdom. So the primordial Torah was God's wisdom. The written Torah is just a fraction of that. And God contemplated his mind to create the world.
Does it make sense to you to also, when we look at Torah, when we talk, I mean, some of us talk about Torah every day and reading Torah, and we have the physical Torah that, you know, the white fire, the black fire, and all that. But does it make sense for us to also think of Torah as simply God's wisdom? That's such a beautiful way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think it's a criterion by which to, approach the Torah. Not everything in the Torah is going to make sense to us. Not everything in the Torah should be taken literally. I think we have to revise and update the Torah in some way. So we want to be guided by something deeper. I mean, to claim that the wisdom of God is pretty outrageous, but to assume that there's something deeper than the literal text. Yeah. Let me call on Mike and Tom, but I'll ask you just for brief questions because the hour is proceeding. I want to get back to Zohar, but please, both of you, Mike.
Hi,
Please.
thank you, Professor Matt. Yeah, quick question. A moment ago, you mentioned Kabbalistic ethical literature. Is that the same as Musar? For example, Duties of the Heart by Ibn Battuta?
Yes, Musar, is ethical literature. Sometimes it's applied more to a later phase, the 19th century, Israel Salanter. What's now called Musar is often that later phase, but there were earlier texts of mystical ethical literature. Bachi ibn Bakuda is a little bit before Kabbalah, but he was influenced by Sufism. He's 11th, 12th century in Spain. He was influenced by Sufism. I was referring to literature that comes out of Tzfat in the 16th century, and that's Kabbalistic ethical literature. In Hebrew, it's called Musar Kabbali, Kabbalistic ethical literature. One of the most beautiful is The Palm Tree of Deborah by Moses Cordovero. I have some selections of that in the Essential Kabbalah. Tom, please.
There it is. Okay, sorry. Where does Moses de Leon say that Rabbi Shimon wrote the Zohar? And where does he say that he's copying it from a manuscript? And why is it not written in the first person? I, Rabbi Shimon, said this, just like the 5 books of Moses are not written, I, Moses, said that.
Yeah. Yeah, the Zohar, the Zohar doesn't start, here is how it was written. It's kind of the Kabbalistic tradition is that it was written in the circle of Rabbi Shimon. You often hear it was written by Rabbi Shimon, but then you would expect it to be in the first person, and it's really not in the first person. It's really a narrative, like we saw, Rabbi Shimon said, whereas the Zohar is written that way. Rabbi Shimon said, Rabbi Abba said, Rabbi Yehuda said. Very often it's two of the companions are walking on the road. They run into a strange character on the road. They're puzzled. Then they go to Rabbi Shimon and he explains everything. So Rabbi Shimon is the hero. Rabbi Shimon is the great master, but it's really kind of a mystical novel. It's a mystical novel about the circle of Rabbi Shimon. Now, there's an ancient story in the Talmud that Rabbi Shimon had to flee from the Romans and that he hid in a cave for 11 years with his son. So the Kabbalistic tradition is that Elijah came and taught Rabbi Shimon and his son every day, and that became the Zohar. Even that is strange because the heroes of the Zohar, there are a lot more people than just Rabbi Shimon and his son, but those are two of the main characters. So the tradition grew that it was written. Moses the Leon apparently told people that. We do have third-person accounts. Someone found Moses the Leon and said, how did this happen? And Moses the Leon said, well, I have the ancient texts that I received, and they go back to Rabbi Shimon. So it was Moses the Leon's claim, but he doesn't put it in writing. The most interesting thing is to compare the books that he admits writing. He wrote a number of books in Hebrew, and he says, I, Moses the Leon, am writing this book in Guadalajara, Spain, that is, not Mexico. In the year, he puts the Hebrew date corresponding to 1290, 1283, 1285. He dates it, he says where he wrote it, and there he is himself writing it. He claims authorship, and he actually quotes the Zohar. He never says, this is what the Zohar says. What he says is, the ancient rabbis have said such and such, or I found in a midrash such and such, and then will come something paraphrased from the Zohar. So it's like he's trying to promote the Zohar as ancient wisdom. Okay, let's go back to the text, and we'll certainly leave time for more questions. Before we continue with the text, I want to show you for a moment this diagram of the Sefirot. Many of you have seen this before. We're not going to go into detail here. I just want to point out a couple things that'll be important for the continuation of the passage. Let's just look at this middle line, okay? Now remember, what are these? These are aspects of God's personality. God is beyond all of these Sefirot, all of these qualities, right? Ultimately, where is Ein Sof? You could say Ein Sof is the white space. Okay, God as infinity is the white space transcending all of these and penetrating, permeating all of these. Keter is the crown on the head, right? This is in the form of a physical being. Chokhmah and Bina, wisdom and understanding, are the divine head, the divine mind. Then you have right and left arms, Chesed, God's love, Gevurah, God's power. But for our purposes, what really matters are these three. Keter, the crown. Tiferet, you could say this is the main masculine aspect of God, the Holy One, blessed be He. And Shekhinah. Okay, Shekhinah, here she's called Malchut. Malchut, kingdom, right? The goal of the system is the union of the male and the female. The union of Tiferet in the middle and Malchut, or Shekhinah, the last of the 10. And the passage we're looking at is going to mention Keter, not calling it by that name, Tiferet, not calling it by that name, and Shekhinah, also not using that name. For our purposes, Tiferet is the written Torah. Tiferet's symbolized by the written Torah, and Shekhinah or Malchut is the oral Torah. You could say God's wisdom up here is the primordial Torah. Okay, but just the passage we're going to look at is going to make some allusion to Keter, the highest Sefirah, Tiferet, the Holy One, blessed be He, and Shekhinah. Okay, so let's continue here. We're up to this passage, another come and see. Okay, this I think is our third come and see. Come and see. So it is above. There is garment, body, soul, and soul of soul. So above, he means the heavens and the Sefirot. The heavens and their host are the garment. Okay, you look up at the sky, you think that's the furthest you could possibly gaze. No, that's just the outer garment. The heavens themselves are the garment. So what's higher? The assembly of Israel is the body. Now, assembly of Israel, you might think that means the people Israel. That's what that phrase usually means in the Talmud. Here it means Shekhinah. This is a name for Shekhinah. Okay, Malchut, that last of the 10 Sefirot. Okay, one of her names, Malchut, she is called Assembly of Israel. It's interesting. Why doesn't he just say Shekhinah? Why doesn't he say Malchut? Because the Zohar wants to make it interesting for us. The Zohar hardly ever gives the actual names of the Sefirot. That's what makes it cryptic. So what is he saying? The heavens are the garment, and higher than the heavens, beyond the heavens, behind the heavens is Shekhinah. So you could say she's the body. Okay, she's hidden by the heavens. Who receives the soul. Shekhinah is the body. She receives the soul, beauty of Israel. Okay, beauty of Israel. Here he actually does say Tiferet Yisrael. Okay, so Tiferet is higher. Going back here for a moment. Malchut is the body. Okay, the heavens are beneath her. The heavens are the garment. Malchut is, or Shekhinah is the body. Assembly of Israel is the body. Who is the soul? The soul is Tiferet. Tiferet Yisrael is hidden on a deeper level, at a higher level. Look over at this note 9. This will help a little bit. Assembly of Israel, beauty of Israel. In rabbinic literature, Knesset Yisrael, Assembly of Israel, refers to the Jewish people, while in the Zohar, it's often associated with Shekhinah, the divine feminine presence, which is the counterpart of the people, that aspect of God most intimately connected with them. Okay, the Assembly of Israel means the people in the Talmud. In the Zohar, it means Shekhinah, but there's a link between the two. Shekhinah is intimately linked with the people of Israel, so she's called Knesset Yisrael, the Assembly of Israel. Here, Shekhinah is described as a body clothed by the heavens, receiving the soul, the masculine aspect of God, namely Tiferet Yisrael, beauty of Israel. Okay, back to the text. So she is the body of the soul. What does that mean? She's the body of the soul? It could mean she's just what he said. She is the body and Tiferet is the soul. But look over at note 10. She is the body of the soul. This isn't just redundant. Rabbinic literature describes a cosmic body. Okay, it's actually called guf, containing all souls. In Kabbalah, this body is identified with Shekhinah. By receiving the soul of Tiferet, she carries all human souls, which are engendered by the union of Tiferet and Shekhinah. Okay, so when the Zohar says here, she's the body of the soul, it means she contains Tiferet, but she contains all souls. The soul we have mentioned is beauty of Israel, real Torah. Now, why does he say that? He just said it. The soul we have mentioned is Tiferet. But notice, real Torah, here he's finally coming back to what he said a moment ago. If you stood at Mount Sinai, if you're a mystic, then you gaze at real Torah. So now he's explaining what real Torah is. What is real Torah? Real Torah is the soul. Real Torah is Tiferet. Real Torah is God. In a sense, he's saying the essence of Torah is God. You're not just studying a text. You're trying to penetrate the outer text, right? The narrative. Then you come to the mitzvah, the body. But if you go deeper, you learn something about God's inner nature. That's real Torah. That's penetrating to the level of Tiferet, the Holy One, blessed be He. But even that isn't the ultimate. The soul of the soul is the Holy Ancient One. Okay, the Holy Ancient One is Keter. Okay, that highest Sefirah. Keter, one of its names is the Holy Ancient One, Atika Kadisha. So Shekhinah, Malchut, is the body. Tiferet is the soul. Keter is the soul of the soul. Here, as we say here, the Holy Ancient One, the primal manifestation of Ein Sof. Okay, so Keter, it's hard to distinguish Keter and Ein Sof. All is connected, this one to that one. Words, don't think of the Sefirot as separate, there's a unity. And now he summarizes, woe to the wicked who say that Torah is merely a story. They look at this garment and no further. Happy are the righteous who look at Torah properly. As wine must sit in a jar, so Torah must sit in this garment, to look only at what is under the garment. All those words, all those stories are garments. Okay, before they were fools, now he's actually saying they're wicked. If you say the Torah is just a story, that's a wicked perspective. People who say that are stopping at the garment level. The righteous look at Torah properly. Now, this is strange. Properly means looking under the garment. Okay, there's something erotic going on here too, right? Torah is feminine, and the Zohar is saying, look under the garment. Don't be satisfied with the outer layer. So in a sense, you could say he's devaluing the outer layer, but that's why he goes on to say, as wine must sit in a jar, so Torah must sit in this garment. Interesting comparison. Wine must sit in a jar. Why do you need the jar? Couldn't you just have the wine? Why bother with a jar? Well, without the jar, the wine is just going to spill on the ground and become mud. So wine has to sit in a jar, and that's why Torah has to sit in a garment. There's something valuable about the garment. It's not the ultimate, but there's something preservative about the garment. But don't be satisfied there. Look only at what is under the garment. All those words, all those stories are garments. Okay, let's take just one or two more questions from people who haven't had a chance to ask yet, because I want to get to another passage. But any of you who has a question, if you haven't asked yet, please just click on the raise hand button. I see Florence and Howard. Let's call on both of you. Florence, please. Good to see you.
So I guess I'm wondering what is meant here by Torah. Is what's being referred to the 5 books, or the Tanakh, or something else?
Yeah, I think basically he's talking about the 5 books of Moses. Right, the Zohar is a commentary on that. The Zohar comments on other parts of the Bible too, but the main body of the Zohar is commentary on Torah. But I'm sure what's behind your question, the word Torah is pretty flexible. You know, Torah can mean the 5 books of Moses, all 304,805 letters. You want to learn something valuable today? That's how many letters there are in the Torah, 304,805. So it's the literal 5 books of Moses, but Torah can mean something much broader, the whole Bible. As we said, there's oral Torah and written Torah. It could be all teaching. What we're doing today is somehow, part of that expansion of Torah, the oral Torah. So, but I think he's talking mostly about you open up Genesis, you open up Exodus, you look at a verse. Don't be fooled. Don't stick with just the pshat, the literal meaning. Howard and Zena, and then we'll take 1 or 2 questions from chat that Callie can call upon, and we'll look at some more later. Howard, please.
Thank you, Rabbi, Dr. Van. The idea that there are garments, and then there is, why are there not garments of the garments, or garments under the garments, and then garments under those garments? And when do you know that you actually have gotten to the underneath of all the garments?
Yeah, you could say this process goes on endlessly, and I think you should never be satisfied to think that you've gotten the ultimate essence of meaning. But the Zohar seems to like the number 4 here, right? I mean, often mystics like the number 3, the number 7, but Jews and Christians in the Middle Ages, they talked about 4 levels of meaning in Torah. So I think that's partly why he has 4 here: garment, body, soul, soul of soul. The Hebrew term for the 4 levels, for many of you know, is pardes. Pardes, which means the same word as paradise, right? Pardes is originally a Persian word that means an orchard. And then it's used, you find it in the Song of Songs, Pardes Rimonim, a pomegranate orchard. But then it comes to mean paradise, the ultimate orchard, the Garden of Eden. But for the Zohar, it means 4 levels of meaning. Pshat, the simple meaning, is Pardes, you could say P-R-D-S. Okay, we'll turn into English. P-R-D-S. P is pshat, the simple. R is remez, a hint. Actually refers to philosophical meaning. D is drash, like midrash, and S is sod, mystery. Really, it shouldn't be PRDS, it should be PDRS, because the historical progression is pshat, the literal, then midrash, drash, then what the philosophers did, what he's calling remez, a hint, and then sod, the mystical. So it should be PDRS, not PRDS, but actually that works very nicely because it would be not pardes, but padres, which fits Spain much better. In fact, if you switch them around a little more, you get Sefarad, which is Spain. Pardes Sefarad, maybe he even had that in mind. But that's, I think, why he likes the four. Zena, please.
Thank you. I wonder could you tell more about the relationship or the perspective between the soul of Torah and the Sod?
Yeah, so Sod was the fourth of those four layers. He's talking about garment, body, soul, and then even soul of soul. As Howard said, you could go on and on ad infinitum. Tiferet, he's identifying as the soul, but don't be satisfied even with that. There's something deeper. So for him, Keter, the ancient, holy ancient one, the soul of the soul, that's really getting that there you're on the verge of infinity, or at the verge of the infinite. You could say Tiferet is God kind of in the normal rabbinic sense, the Holy One, blessed be He, a personal God. Keter is really at the verge of Ein Sof, where God is beyond all description, all definition. So that would be, a deeper layer of soul. Callie, maybe we'll take whatever you think, one or two questions from the chat, and then
Great.
we'll look at one more passage.
Great. So we had several people actually ask about what was happening in Spain at the time, and how would Moses de Leon have been influenced, or how would his sensibility about Torah have been influenced about how Jews were being treated at the time, how Christian thinking was accelerating at the time, and in Spain, and how Muslim thinking was also at the time.
Yeah, it's good to explore the historical context. I didn't start here with much historical background, tiny bit last week because we have so little time. But it is fascinating to think what was going on in Spain at the time. You could say there's really a renaissance there. Usually we think of Renaissance as 15th century in Italy, but scholars talk about earlier renaissances in Europe. And really there was a renaissance in Spain because of the king at the time. The king was Alfonso X, and he's called Alfonso el Sabio. Sabio meaning the wise, Alfonso the Wise. Why was he called that? Because he collected all the wisdom of the world. In fact, when the Zohar said, remember in this passage, even rulers of the world have words more sublime, he probably had in mind collections that were made by Alfonso and were put together to guide princes. Sometimes they were called mirrors for the princes. So the princes would learn something before they came to the throne. So Alfonso collected the wisdom of the world. He helped translate ancient Greek wisdom into Spanish. He hired Jews and Muslims to translate Arabic translations of Greek philosophy into Spanish. In fact, there wasn't much Spanish literature at the time. He, in a sense, created Castilian. He created medieval Spanish by translating these books of philosophy from Arabic into Castilian, Arabic into Spanish. So he collected wisdom. He was creating a renaissance. He, in fact, was also interested in the Talmud and in the Kabbalah. There seems to be some vague connection between Moses de Leon and the royal court. Maybe he tried to convince Alfonso that he had an ancient text. Alfonso, are you interested in ancient wisdom? Here's some ancient wisdom. It goes back to Rabbi Shimon in the 2nd century. We don't know if he made that claim, but he did have some contact with the royal court. So Alfonso is the king. This doesn't mean that Alfonso was totally open-minded. There was legislation put in that was enacted discriminating against Jews. Okay, of course, this is common throughout Europe. I would say the Jews in Spain had it better off than Jews in much of Northern Europe. Jews were allowed to own land. There were many Jews involved in administration and the government. But there were restrictions and certainly some discrimination. Remember, this is a couple hundred years before the Jews were expelled, right? The Jews weren't expelled until 1492. You could say things got bad after around 1391. We're still 100 years before that, the 1280s, the 1290s. So the Jews lived in an ambivalent state, ambivalent situation. What's interesting here are two things I'll mention briefly. One is Maimonides. Maimonides' work was already well known. He was the great Jewish philosopher. You couldn't say he was a mystic per se, but he had a deep spirituality. He was also, of course, very, very rational. He was the great rationalist philosopher. So there was some tension between rationalist philosophy and mysticism. In some ways, the Zohar is a reaction against Maimonides, even though the Zohar was itself influenced by Maimonides. And I'll just mention also what's going on in the Christian world, which is worship, I should say veneration of Mary, right? Mary was venerated. Technically, she wasn't divine, but for the common Christians, she seemed almost divine. And I would say the veneration of Mary in the Christian world stimulated some of the Kabbalists to envision Shekhinah as being so prominent, right? If they had a feminine figure that was part of the religious system, Jews wanted to promote their feminine figure, Shekhinah. The Kabbalah didn't invent Shekhinah, but the Kabbalah emphasized Shekhinah.
Okay, one more from the chat.
Take one. Yeah.
Great. So we had a question come in from Jeff, who is actually asking sort of the opposite question of how would the Zohar have affected other religions, mystical Christians, other philosophers at that time, and then also now, how are we seeing it still impact us today?
Yeah, I would say the Zohar didn't have much direct impact in the non-Jewish world because of that, what we mentioned, because it's written in Aramaic. Even in the Jewish world, it was limited. But the fact that it was translated into Latin during the Renaissance, okay, in the 15th century, parts of it were translated into Latin. Christians were fascinated by it. Christians thought that Kabbalah was the true ancient Jewish wisdom, or they believed that it went back to the 2nd century. And this wasn't only a positive evaluation of Judaism, it really was, they thought there were certain Christian elements in the Zohar. Okay, we mentioned Mary and Shekhinah. Some Christians thought, look, the Jews are really talking about Mary. And if Tiferet is described as the son of the divine parents, right? Remember in that diagram we have of the Sefirot, Tiferet, right? The Holy One, blessed be He, is the son of Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah is father, Bina is mother. They give birth to a son and a daughter, Tiferet and Shekhinah. So if Tiferet is the son of God, if Tiferet is divine and a son, that of course sounded like the Son of God in Christology. So Christians thought, if we can turn the Jews on to their own hidden wisdom, we can help convert them to Christianity. It turned into a tool for proselytizing. So it had very positive and negative effects. Today, of course, Kabbalah is widespread. We can thank in part, I would say, two people, Gershom Scholem and Madonna. Some of you may know more about Madonna than Scholem. Scholem was the great scholar who made it available to the Western world, really. He devoted his life, his career to explaining the Kabbalah. And Madonna, for all the positive and negative aspects of what she's done, she has made Kabbalah widely known. I would say, 1% of the people who found out about it via Madonna, if they look deeper into Kabbalah, that would certainly be a good number of people. The positive thing of that pop Kabbalah, you could say, the positive thing is that people go to their rabbi and they say, well, what is this? And often the rabbi hasn't learned it in rabbinical school, because many rabbinical schools don't even teach Kabbalah, at least until recently. Now most rabbinical schools do teach it. But I think it's good to embarrass rabbis by asking them to teach something about Kabbalah. Okay, we're already almost near the end of time, but I want to look at one more passage with you. We'll just look through it a little more quickly than it deserves, but this is the passage. The Romance of Torah. Some of you have studied this before, I'm sure. This is a little story, comes in the middle of the Zohar. Two of the companions, two of the disciples of Rabbi Shimon are walking on the way. They run into a donkey driver. And this donkey driver seems to be a total idiot. But it turns out, of course, that he's really a great wise sage in disguise. Again, we have this element of disguise. And this is what the donkey driver says to the two traveling rabbis. Human beings are so confused in their minds. They do not see the way of truth in Torah. She calls out to them every day in love, but they do not want to turn their heads. She removes a word from her sheath, is seen for a moment, then quickly hides away, but she does so only for those who know her intimately. Okay, again, Torah is concealed. Here it's not so much a garment. She's hidden away, but the garment will come into play very soon. A parable. To what can this be compared? To a beloved, ravishing maiden, hidden deep within her palace. She has one lover, unknown to anyone, hidden too. Out of love for her, this lover passes by her gate constantly, lifting his eyes to every side. Knowing that her lover hovers about her gate constantly, what does she do? She opens a little window in her hidden palace, revealing her face to her lover, then swiftly withdraws, concealing herself. No one near him sees or reflects, only the lover, and his heart and his soul and everything within him flow out to her. He knows that out of love for him, she revealed herself for that one moment to awaken love in him. Okay, this is one of those tales of chivalry, right? The Zohar knows that its audience has read some of this literature or heard about it. So he's actually paraphrasing a story, you could say, from the Tales of King Arthur, something like that. But he's doing it to compare it to Torah, as he now says. So it is with the word of Torah. She reveals herself to no one but her lover. Torah knows that one who is wise of heart hovers about her gate every day. What does she do? She reveals her face to him from the palace and beckons him with a hint, then swiftly withdraws to her hiding place. No one there knows or reflects, he alone does, and his heart and his soul and everything within him flows out to her. This is why Torah reveals and conceals herself. With love, she approaches her lover to arouse love with him. So somehow Torah is peeking out of the window for a moment. Only the lover sees. How does this relate to the levels of Torah? Now he says, come and see the way of Torah. At first, when she begins to reveal herself to a human, she beckons him with a hint. If he perceives, good. If not, she sends him a message calling him simple. Torah says to her messenger, tell that simple one to come closer so I can talk with him. He approaches. She begins to speak with him from behind a curtain she has drawn, words he can follow until he reflects a little at a time. This is Drasha. Okay, we could say Midrash. Okay, you could say the Torah begins with the pshat, that P of Pardes, okay, the simple meaning, but now she reveals a little more. She's not hidden behind the wall. Now it's just behind a curtain. That's Midrash. Then she converses with him through a veil. Now there's even less of a barrier. Words riddled with allegory. This is Haggadah. Okay, we think of Haggadah, of course, as the Passover Haggadah, but here Haggadah really means allegory, philosophical allegory. You could say taking the stories of Torah as a way to teach philosophical truth. That's even deeper than Midrash, even deeper than the simple meaning. But of course, we have to have four. Okay, we have the simple, Midrash, philosophical allegory. Once he has grown accustomed to her, she reveals herself face to face and tells him all her hidden secrets, all the hidden ways, since primordial days, secreted in her heart. Now he is a complete human being, husband of Torah, master of the house. All her secrets she has revealed to him, withholding nothing, concealing nothing. She says to him, do you see that word, that hint with which I beckoned you at first? So many secrets there, this one and that one. Now he sees that nothing should be added to those words and nothing taken away. Now the pshat of the verse, just like it is. Not even a single letter should be added or deleted. Human beings should become aware pursuing Torah to become her lovers. It's an amazing passage. I think one of the most remarkable things is that he ends up with the pshat. I said that he began with the pshat, okay, because the Torah, your first view of the Torah is the literal meaning, the simple word on the page. But he seems to be saying the Torah, you can read it on the surface, but then you want to go deeper to Midrash. You want to go even deeper to get some philosophical insight. Then there's an ultimate revelation. I wouldn't say ultimate, penultimate. Then there's a revelation face to face. You could say the naked reality of Torah. Okay, there's something erotic going on here too. This lover becomes married to the Torah. But that isn't the ultimate. That's what's interesting. There's something beyond the mystical meaning. And what is that? The pshat. Somehow this comes back full circle to the simple word on the page, but it's no longer that simple word. Now it contains all of those possible meanings. This really shows you how the Zohar is radical and conservative simultaneously. It's not satisfied with a simple meaning, but it doesn't want you to reject that meaning, because that meaning, as we saw before, is the jar for the wine. It's the garment for the essence, because we have to have a way to convey it to students, to convey it to our children, to convey it to our grandchildren. So there's a vehicle to convey the Torah. That's the story, that's the narrative, that's the garment. And then we hope that our daughter, our son, will find her own deep meaning, her own inner meaning. But the Zohar is saying, come back to the pshat, come back to the simple, because it's no longer so simple. I think Marita had a question, and I think there was one other hand raised. So Marita, feel free to ask if you'd like.
This is so beautiful. Thank you so much, Professor Daniel. I reminds me of wisdom too. The book of the Proverbs, where wisdom calls out, and she contrasts herself with the evil woman who will seduce the man into bad paths. But she, on the other hand, calls out to humanity and loves humanity.
Right.
That's all I have to say.
Right. The Zohar definitely has that image of Proverbs in mind. In fact, it quotes a verse from Proverbs when it says, simple, tell that simple one to come here. So this is wisdom as feminine, of course, long before the Zohar. In the book of Proverbs, wisdom is God's consort. Wisdom helps God create the world. That turns into Torah helping to create the world. Great. Thank you. Sarah, please.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. My question is, how do we, or not how do we, but do we ever attain such wisdom? Or is this the study of a lifetime that continues throughout our life in finding this love for God and the love that God brings back to us? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the best way to think of this is getting a glimpse. Right? I don't think there's an ultimate truth you're going to reach, and then you can write it down, you can put it in your pocket. Okay, we talked about this a little last week. We should always be somewhat suspicious of the ultimate truth, right? That anyone who says this is it, because is that really going to apply to us tomorrow? Even if it makes perfect sense now, is it going to work? So Torah is this storehouse of wisdom, but we have to ripen it, right? We have to update it. And I think to constantly, be looking for a deeper meaning. You can get tired of that. You want to find something you can rely on. You want to construct some philosophy of life. I think we all try to do that. We can't just, start from scratch every morning. So there are guidelines. There are guidelines, but I think we should be hesitant to say, this is the final embodiment of wisdom. Everything is there. So to let it unfold stage by stage, and to celebrate those moments of discovery, of breakthrough, even if they won't be exactly accurate, next week.
We are about 10 minutes over, so I think that we should probably say goodbye to you, even though there's so many questions.
Great, Kat, let me just call on one more person, my friend Mona.
Sure. And let me just say, if you're
we
watching
can-
this, if you have a question, you haven't had a chance to ask it yet, if you want to put it in the chat right now, I'll write them down and make sure we get as many answered as possible before we send out the post-program email.
Yeah, you can send them to me. You send me the questions, I can respond to you and you'll distribute them. Mona, please.
Thank you. This last piece was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, the Torah wants to be understood. There's a real yearning on the part of the Shekhinah or the divine or the Torah for us to understand. Where is that from, Danny? I missed that citation.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. I'm glad you pointed that out. Compared to the first passage was, how should you look at Torah? This begins with Torah, right? Torah is gazing. Torah wants to engage the reader. Torah is in love with us. We have to revise this, turn into a female student and male Torah. Here, Torah is female. There's a relationship going on. Torah wants to be known. Torah wants to be discovered. It's a passage in the Zohar's commentary on Exodus, on Torah portion Mishpatim. In Pritzker edition, it's beginning of volume 5. And in the traditional Zohar, it's volume 2. I think it's like 98a.
Can you send us that citation or
yeah, sure. Yeah, here it's Zohar 2, 99a to b. But I'll give Callie the reference. In fact, what I can do is make available the fuller version on the Pritzker edition. I have a PDF of this whole passage in the Pritzker edition, and I'll send that along with the PDF we have here. Great.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone who participated. That was like maybe the most questions I've ever gotten. So that was amazing. And thank you so much to our speaker. I think we all learned a lot today. And I hope everyone has an amazing new year and a meaningful fast this week. And thank you to Professor Matt.
Great. Good to be with you. Some of you are going to join the Zohar course beginning in a few weeks.
Yes.
If you want to find out more, the website is in the chat, and we'll send out information about it.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Thank you very much.
Gemar Chatan.